So there's my Twitter handle and my email. Again, I do try to do Twitter a lot. So if anybody wants to be in contact, that's a great way to reach out to me later. The biggest way I have used Edulastic, which I've used it over the last couple of years, but this last year, I was very intentional with the way I used it, and it really helped me during the distance learning time. So it was the only homework that I had for my students in 7th grade math all year. So every week, that was their homework that I assigned. So we had done that every week all year. So when we moved to distance learning, I continued that, and that was really helpful to my students because they knew that that was what they were going to have each week. They were used to the format. They had all signed in, all of that kind of stuff. And I can say too, so I did the distance learning thing as a teacher, and I also have, as a mom, I have 3 kids. They were 8th, 6th, and kindergarten. And I know one of our biggest struggles was where do we turn in what was being graded, all these different ones. And as a teacher, it was beneficial to tell my parents, my students, this is what we're doing, this is the grade, and they were used to it. So this is how I used it during the school year. So I'm just going to kind of give you a quick overview of that, and then I'll kind of tell you how I modified that for it to work in distance learning. So the way I did it is I assigned it every Tuesday, and they were, at the beginning of the year, we did the whole Google sign on and all of that, so all they had to do each time was click on it. It was due Thursday at midnight, and it would always include whatever standard we were working on for that week, and then I usually try to throw in 2 or 3 spiral review questions, or at the beginning of the year I would prior grade level questions, and then the same thing at the end of the year, then I could select a few 8th grade questions to throw in there. So I always had that in there. I always allowed students to have it reset if they would like to get a better grade, and I did modify that a little bit for distance learning. I'll talk about that. So I had a process for that, and that's kind of what those next bullets talk about. And then I always had class work time, and I did the same thing just during distance learning. For the most part, the way my school did distance learning, and I know everybody does it differently, but we were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday was a catch-up day. So this still kind of worked because Tuesday I would assign it and instruct, Wednesday would be a work day, and then Thursday they could ask specific questions. So, and we use Canvas, so this is just kind of how I used Edulastic within Canvas for kids to know what they needed to each day. So like this was on April 1st, this was kind of their general things. And then you can see I provided notes that went along with the topic, and then their Edulastic was linked right there. So they could go right to it from there. And again, the consistency was the big key for me in doing all of this. So then they would have like their instructions specifically for today. And even though I like the whole tech thing, sometimes, you got to go like old school paper pencil. So I would do paper pencil notes that went with the assignment. So, and then just scan them in. So this way, when they were doing it, they could print them out, they could have it up on their screen. So here I gave information that corresponded to this question on Edulastic. So that was nice to do it that way. And I usually don't scramble the questions. I know that's a feature that you can use, but that would be a suggestion to me too. If you're going to provide notes in this kind of environment, distance learning, it was nice to have those numbers match up in a one-to-one correspondence rather than being scrambled. So that was kind of how I did that. And these are kind of benefits all the way through, but ones that I found kind of more specific. They're standards based. So if you have a curriculum calendar, you can just set I did my assignments several weeks in advance, and it helped keep me on schedule. And then the same thing at the end of the year, I knew what standards I had through data that I needed to hit again, because when this distance learning hit, I basically had covered everything because we were getting close to standardized testing. But I could go back and put those specific standards in that they either need review on or are important to lead into the next grade level. The released items are great. Obviously this year, I'm assuming no states tested, but so it wasn't such a big deal with that. You do have the ability to reset. I didn't do too much of that during the distance learning. And the biggest benefit to me was it made grading so much easier, 1,000 times easier, and for parents to see. So they can look on there and they can see what their child's done. And during that distance learning time, I could check on a class and I could say, to try to open communication, if they're halfway through, I could see where they're at and I could shoot them a message and say, hey, you're only about halfway through and it's due tomorrow, you need to keep going. Or I'd say, it looks like you got, I would see the color coding and I would say, it looks like you got number 3 wrong. Make sure you go back to the notes and then do that. So it helped with communications with students for specific things too that I could help them with. So some of the ways I modified the way I use Edulastic from the regular traditional classroom to distance learning. So I usually did a Tuesday, Thursday during the school year. During distance learning, I did like a full week just to give people more time with that. If they wanted it reset, they had to send me a message through Canvas or email. And I usually told them that could be a 24 to 48 hour window, just kind of depending on how that worked. I did notes and videos within a module that would mimic what we would have done in class. So if I gave them an assignment over combining like terms, I would record a video of me using the whiteboard with that, put some notes on there, and then their assignment would be the Edulastic. During the school year, I usually leave it to where they can only see correct and incorrect and not leave all of their answers in as choices. And the reason I do that is so that it encourages them to write things down, because I know that's a struggle for students is that transition to paper, pencil to computer. So to encourage them to write it down. But a lot of times on this, I did leave the answers for them redoing it just because of the extra difficulties of being distance learning as well. And then for the last 2 weeks, I gave them anything greater than an 80, that has a typo in it, and 80% would go ahead and get the full credit. And I have how I kind of do my, so the way I've done my grades, every assignment is always worth 10 points. I just kind of have like an 80-20 rule in my class with testing and homework points. So I just made every assignment worth 10 points. So whether there were 5 questions or 15, I just made it 10 points. It was really simple to keep it that way. It was very, again, consistency I think is a big key in this distance learning thing. You'll get better results if you do the same, if you put some consistency in your routine. So if they got an 86, traditionally that would go in as an 8.6 out of 10 in my grade book. That's how I've done it. Now, like I said, those last 2 weeks when I was really trying to push kids to log on and get their work done, that was kind of an incentive. So if they mastered, to me, 80% was mastery, that if they scored greater than 80%, it went in as a 10 out of 10. And I still allowed for resets if they were requested. And sometimes I'll say a message and I'll say, hey, you got less than 50%. If I reset it, are you gonna have time to retake it? A lot of times we do it, communicate that way as well. So some of my other helpful hints, especially when I first got started, I just call it like a sandbox account. So like an extra class that you create. So you can put your assessments in there and then like a sample student. So you can go in and see what it looks like for them. I think that's helpful. To start, use the pre-made assessments. So you can type in any topic and use those pre-made ones, or search by standard. And that's how I did my homework, because I knew what standards we were doing each week. And I have always found it helpful to not have it open and close automatically, but to do manual, especially during distance learning, because people have all kinds of situations. Like I heard one of the panelists say earlier, somebody didn't have internet for 3 days. So I found that if I just do the manual open and closing, it helps for those special kind of situations where we're trying to give people extra time because everybody's in a different situation. So I would really suggest that if you use it during distance learning, is just do the manual open and close, because I'm assuming around my school and schools I've talked to, due dates are pretty flexible right now. So that allows you to do that. That would be a important feature.